Welcome to the webinar hosted by Copenhagen Center on Energy Efficiency in collaboration with World Resource Institute. This webinar is organized under the umbrella of Sustainable Energy for All Building Efficiency Accelerator and will focus on tools for energy efficiency in buildings and their role in policy design. My name is Ksenia Petrichenko, and I'm a researcher at Copenhagen Center on Energy Efficiency. C2E2 provides research and advisory activities in the field of energy efficiency and serves as energy efficiency hub for Sustainable Energy for All initiative. I would like to briefly introduce our speakers today. We have, besides myself, we have Eric Macras, who is Building Efficiency Manager at World Resource Institute. He supports Building Efficiency Accelerator and works with a number of cities on supporting policy development. Brian Dean works with IA Energy Efficiency Divisions and coordinates IA policy databases and energy efficiency market report, as well as provides regional energy efficiency policy recommendations. Stefan Thomas is a director of the research group at Wuppertal Institute, and his key expertise lies in analysis, development, and testing of policy instruments, exposed evaluation of policies, and energy efficiency business concepts. And Benigna Bozakic is a researcher at Central European University Center for Climate Change and Sustainable Energy Policies, with expertise in evaluation of the costs, benefits, and co-benefits of energy efficiency policies. Our agenda for today, after this brief introduction, we'll have overview of Building Efficiency Accelerator and its work, which will be given by Eric. Then I will give a very brief introduction on the work C2E2 and WRI have been doing on analyzing available tools for energy efficiency in buildings. And then we will move to the case studies of different tools which can help in designing effective energy efficiency policy instruments. Here Brian will tell us about IA policy databases and work on multiple benefits. Stefan will present the opportunities of Big EE platform, and Benigna will talk about handbook of sustainable building policies developed for policy design in developing countries. At the end of the webinar, Eric will share Buildings Accelerator experiences in helping cities with their policy design. And we will conclude the webinar with questions and answers. So please feel free to post your questions anytime during the webinar using the question function on your GoToWebinar panel. And you can also indicate which speaker you would like to address this question to. With this, I would like to hand over the floor to Eric. Eric, please, floor is yours.
Yeah, I think my screen is probably showing now. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. This is Eric Macras from the World Resources Institute. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the Building Efficiency Accelerator, what it is, and what we do and how it's relevant to this webinar. The Building Efficiency Accelerator is a part of the Sustainable Energy for All initiative, which was launched by the World Bank and the United Nations around the goal of achieving sustainable energy for all by 2030, a very broad goal that underneath it has three objectives around energy access, energy efficiency, and renewable energy. And the work of the accelerators touches on all three of those, but is primarily focused on this goal of doubling the global rate of improvement in energy efficiency. The Sustainable Energy for All, under their efficiency work, one of the main implementing trajectories or bodies to implement the energy efficiency goals are these energy efficiency accelerators. There are 6 that are in full operation and others under development. my work and the work of this webinar is focused on the one here on buildings, promoting sustainable building policies and practices worldwide to achieve that goal of improving the rate of energy efficiency globally. The Building Efficiency Accelerator is, like all the other accelerators, is a partnership of public, private, nonprofit actors focused around helping jurisdictional entities take action on energy efficiency. So the Building Efficiency Accelerator works with all sorts of governments, but is focused primarily on serving subnational jurisdictions, helping them to accelerate their action. So cities, but also subnational entities like states and provinces. There are, at this point, over a dozen subnational jurisdictions who are partnering with the accelerator, and over 3 dozen service providers, NGOs and associations that provide assistance to these subnational jurisdictions in accelerating their actions. So building efficiency is really important for a lot of different elements, everything across the economic benefits of improving efficiency and the social and environmental ones. Buildings have a large impact on energy use and the way we use energy, as well as the environmental impacts around global greenhouse gas emissions. There's a large potential that's untapped around energy efficiency opportunities in buildings, and these the choices that we make now are really important because they will last for decades into the future, as buildings are some of the longest lasting infrastructure investments that are made. All reasons why we should be emphasizing and taking action quickly on building efficiency. So that's kind of the background. The theory of action for the Building Efficiency Accelerator is that by bringing together expertise from these different actors and bringing capacity to take action and assisting that at the subnational level, we can accelerate what hasn't happened before. The barriers that we see in energy efficiency are not technical, they're not economic, they're primarily around institution action and capacity to take action. And we feel as though the accelerator is already helping to bridge the gap in an efficiency investment. So what are cities signing up to do? Primarily 3 things in support of this overarching commitment to double the rate of energy efficiency improvement within their jurisdiction. They're committing to implement 1 enabling policy, implement a demonstration project, either in a building or something that's visible to their community, and then to track and communicate their progress toward more efficient buildings in their community. And the Building Efficiency Accelerator provides in general 4 different categories of services and support to help them do that. Local action prioritization and tools and expertise, 2 things that we're going to be talking about a little bit today, some of those tools and how cities can go through the process of identifying, prioritizing, and sequencing the actions that they feel to be most important to their local needs. The accelerator is also helping to connect projects to funding for them and helping with that process of translating a good project into something that's also fundable and financeable by entities with capital. And then finally, providing more international recognition and collaboration for those actions that are happening locally, helping them learn from their peers, as well as getting recognition in global forums for the action they've taken and inspiring others. So this is the list of all the organizational partners. It's a great brain trust that's helping these jurisdictions and helping to accelerate and scale up action on building efficiency around the world. I'll talk a little bit more in detail about some of those actions in an example later on, but just wanted to recognize all these partners, many of which are presenting on the webinar, and say thank you, looking forward to interacting with you around this topic of tools for policy design. And now I'm back to Senya.
Thank you, Eric. I will give a very brief overview of the work which C2E2 and WRI have been doing on available tools, on mapping available tools for building efficiency, Accelerator. The main idea for this exercise was to analyze and map publicly available tools and sources on energy efficiency in buildings in order to assist local policymakers in accelerating their energy efficiency efforts. We selected more than 30 tools based on various criteria, and the results of this analysis will be presented in our upcoming publications, Driving Transformation Report, which will be published by WRI this year, as well as Collaborative C2E2 WRI Working Paper. The main framework which we used in this analysis was policy cycle, which we split in several stages, which you can see on the screen. We also looked at different types of the tools in terms of whether these are tools which are supporting policy efforts or the tools which can be helpful in project design, be it construction project or renovation project. Taking this cycle in mind, we try to identify the key questions the city might face on each stages of this cycle and key instruments or key information sources and tools which can be used by the city in order to answer these questions. For the first stage, which is scoping and is focused on developing the baseline for energy efficiency as well as identification of key barriers to energy efficiency, these are the tools we thought can be recommended for the city in order to address their data limitations and help with certain guidelines. At the second stage, which is identification of potential policy options which can help to address the identified barriers, we also listed a number of tools which you can see on the screen. And these two stages were covered under our previous webinar, which took place in November, where we looked at carbon metric and trace tool developed by World Bank as case studies. The recording of this webinar is available on YouTube and you can access it with the link. During today's webinar, we are going to focus on policy design, and three tools which are going to be featured today will focus on this stage of development. Here at this stage, it is very important to look at existing guidelines and existing policy practices which are available in a number of sources, as well as for cities it is quite beneficial to include multiple benefits to energy efficiency in their policy design. The next stage is policy and project implementation, and for this stage we also identified different tools which you can see on the screen, and this is ongoing effort. So if you know any tools which you think can be potentially included in this overview, we will be very happy to hear your suggestions. The last stage is evaluation and reporting, which is focusing on tracking the impacts of policies and projects for energy efficiency improvement. Here we separate tools which are focused on policy development and project design. These two stages will be also covered in our upcoming webinars, so please follow our updates and we will inform you of any webinars which we are going to host for Building Efficiency Accelerator. Several ideas we have already put for upcoming months. As you can see, the webinars which we are going to conduct are covering a broad variety of topics, not only tools but also particular policy instruments as well as other important topics in the field of building energy efficiency. We would also like to invite your suggestions for potential topics for our webinar, and at the end of this webinar we will have a little survey where you would have the opportunity to suggest a topic which you think is very important in the field of building energy efficiency. With this, I would like to move to the next part of our presentation, which is building efficiency tools case studies, and I will give the floor to Brian Dean. Brian, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you, Christina. Hello, everybody. I'm going to talk about three different databases here at the IEA that are accessible via the website. and also the multiple benefits of energy efficiency. The three different databases, the first one is a very high-level database that looks at global energy efficiency policies, so that's the policies and measures database. The second one is in a little bit more detail, talks specifically about building energy efficiency policies, including codes, labels, and incentives. The third database is also more detailed in that it's a collection of practices of data collection that can be used when analyzing the effectiveness of policies and trying to determine what policies can be put in place. And then finally, I'll talk about the multiple benefits of energy efficiency. So for PAMs, when you go to the website, iea.org/policies and measures, you'll see that there's actually 4 components of PAMs. First one on climate change, and then renewable energy, and then I'm going to be talking about this energy efficiency database today, and then also the building energy efficiency policies database, which you can access through the PAMs database as well. The PAMs database is set up so that there's a map that shows the coverage of policies that are currently tracked in PAMs. And so you can click on a single country and you can see all the policies that are currently in place. You'll notice that we don't have coverage in every country around the globe, so we're always looking to improve that. So if you're aware of any policies that are not in our databases yet, feel free to send them my way. In addition to navigating it via a map, you can also navigate it via some links that either by policy type, by targets, or by status, or you can just do a keyword search. Also, you'll notice on the left-hand side, there's you can search by the 25 energy efficiency recommendations. The IEA actually created a book in 2008 and updated it in 2011 that looks at the 25 energy efficiency policy recommendations. And you'll see here that there's 5 specific recommendations in buildings. So the database is set up so that you can click directly in on existing building policies or codes and standards policies and these 5 different measures. Once you've clicked in, so this is a look at some of the data that's in Canada. So you'll see that there's a series of policies. You'll see what year they were put in place, whether they're in force now or not. And then you can click into each of those policies as well, and you can get some details on what exactly the policy instruments are, and potentially a link to the actual website as well. So as I said, this is sort of a high-level global database, doesn't have significant details on the policies. Now BEEP is a little bit different in that it does have additional details. However, it does start off again with a map where you can click into a country and see what building energy efficiency policies are available for a country. There's also a way to sort it based on keyword searches as well. Again, looking at Canada, we can see that there are a series of codes, labels, and incentives that are currently in BEEP. Once you click into those, you can then see much more detailed information about the policy. So in this particular case, I'm showing some of the information from the prescriptive path of a code and the performance path of a code. And this level of detail, of course, is more useful for jurisdictions when they're looking to determine what kind of requirements they could set in their own region. And so we aim to have this level of information on all building energy efficiency policies and standards globally, although it's still a work in progress, as everything always is. For the data and indicators, there's a database that was set up through our statistics division, where the IEA collects data from all the countries globally. And as part of that effort, you can see that there are different data types, or methodologies, and content that's available here, such as survey instruments, modeling instruments, and things like that. So just like PAMs and BEEP, once you sort into it, you can see, so this is a series of residential surveys, so you can click in country by country to see what types of residential surveys are available, and potentially create your own survey instrument based on the questions that are asked by other countries. There's some high-level information like this. What's the intent of the survey instrument, maybe? And then there's also more detailed documentation available for most of the details in this energy efficiency indicators database. So in this particular case, links to the U.S. Department of Energy's Commercial Building Energy Consumption Survey and the survey instruments that they used for that survey. So those are the databases. You know, I think that these are helpful for many jurisdictions, and hopefully they'll be helpful for you as well. Now, the multiple benefits. This is an interesting topic that has been worked on by the IEA for a few years now. We published a book in 2014, and this famous flower here has been referenced quite a bit because it actually shows. So energy savings is, you know, one of the benefits that we often can quantify and understand really well for energy efficiency. However, many of the other aspects of it are just now starting to become quantifiable and are being talked about when analyzing policies to understand the effectiveness of those policies. So this book, I think, has done a good job of helping to set the baseline for where what types of benefits and how to quantify them. And more work is ongoing as well. But this is a free document, free book that you can download from the IEA website. And you'll see once you get to that link, there's a number of books that are available for free from the IEA. A lot of times people think everything's paid for, but luckily there's a lot of free stuff. Okay, so one of the multiple benefits, I like these pictures because it illustrates very clearly, you know, a before and after of an energy efficiency project. And clearly what you have on the right-hand side is much better visibility. You can even see the crosswalk signs much clearer. So what you're getting is better light quality, improved safety, and all of that with less energy use, and oftentimes less maintenance costs and many other benefits going into the future. The conversation under multiple benefits is then looked at through a series of perspectives, and this is an interesting chart that looks at the cost and benefits as from the energy provider perspective, the benefits associated with utilities from the multiple benefits of energy efficiency. And you know, more than this being something that could be used in all locations, but it's more about the methodology, such that you could actually quantify the impacts or the benefits associated with you know, each of the generation, transmission, distribution type activities, and put those benefits into the cost analysis associated with your policy development. And then there's another range of perspectives, and I won't go through each of these upcoming slides, but I just want to show you the sort of high level, which is that there's owner and occupant perspective, oftentimes talking about the quality of the building and health and comfort type issues. There's an industry perspective, so this is beyond buildings, but looking at productivity and value creation, and you know, lighting and other things can bring increased productivity. There's a societal perspective, which oftentimes is looking at jobs and economics, you know, broader global society, you could say. And then slightly more fine-tuned is looking at the country perspective, where oftentimes when we're talking with emerging economies and developing countries, they're particularly interested in developing their economic base, getting rid of poverty, improving the local air pollution. So these are all very much country-level issues, and multiple benefits can be looked at from a country perspective. Now, beyond the country perspective, when we talk specifically about public budgets, now this could be local public budgets, state budgets, or national budgets, there are different revenue streams and different expenses associated with energy efficiency. And the multiple benefits book looks at each of these topics in detail. And so you'll see that there are opportunities where energy efficiency can increase the income for the public budget and decrease the expense. And of course, in other cases, there may be increased expenses or decreased incomes. So each of these can be quantified and accounted for in the decision process. And here we have 10 different types of macroeconomic impacts. So I just wanted to leave you with this one last slide, which is, again, with the flower, and then this new topic that we're working on right now, which is energy efficient prosperity. And what we see is that the multiple benefits, which is a way of capturing all of the economic and financial benefits associated with energy efficiency. Now what we're doing is we're taking it further, one step further, and saying that energy efficiency is a means for prosperity through economic and social development. And we think that this is a message that can resonate with countries that have historically maybe not been focused on environmental issues, but maybe are focused on economic and social issues. And energy efficiency is a means for meeting their goals. And so with that, I will hand it over to Stefan here. And Stefan, you should have that now.
Thank you, Brian. I have to go to full screen mode and hope everybody can hear me now. Hello to all participants. I'd like to present to you the bigee.net platform on energy efficiency in buildings and appliances, but here we are of course more interested in the buildings part. First, a few words. BigE started in early 2010 as an international initiative by research institutes and energy agencies, and it's coordinated by the Wuppertal Institute here in Germany, and I've been the coordinator of that project since then. The main funding source has been so far the International Climate Initiative by the German Federal Ministry for the Environment. Let me show you who our partners are here at the bottom of the homepage. We have partners from China, India, and South Africa. In China, it's CSIS IBR, the Chinese Society of Urban Studies, and Shenzhen Institute of Building Research. And top 10 China, it's the Terry Institute and the Bureau of Energy Efficiency in India, and it's Sanedi in South Africa. On BigE, we have 3 worldwide guides on policy, buildings and appliances. Buildings and appliances is more the technical issues and solutions on improving energy efficiency, also on potentials. With this, we offer a guide to energy efficiency in buildings and the policy to advance it in a user-oriented, transparent and comprehensive way, but with phased levels of detail. So every item will have key messages on the top, then some summary or overview information, and then the detail needed to understand what to address in policy design and implementation, or what to ask from building advisors. With this, we are mainly targeting policymakers, but also actors along the value chain. And we have kind of a double structure. In addition to the policies and technologies from around the world that we are gathering and reviewing, we also look at specific policies and markets in 3 countries, in China, South Africa, and soon following also India. You see on the top here the link to the country pages. Because these countries stand for a large part of the global building sector, obviously. I would now like to go to the policy guide, so let's start it. You see we have that again split into policy for buildings and policy for energy efficiency in appliances. And so here we will of course focus on the buildings. And so the first information that you get on the policy guide for buildings is an overview of the policy package, because this guide is designed to help you find an appropriate combination of policies and measures to gradually make ultra-low energy buildings the standard in new buildings and to achieve high energy savings in building retrofit and operation. We have a holistic strategic approach to policy design, starting from the markets and the market actors, looking at the barriers for the different actors, and concluding also then looking at advanced countries, that a combination or package of policies and measures is needed to assist those market actors overcome their barriers, and in this way to make energy efficiency happen. We have two broad categories of policies that we identified, that are those in the governance framework, displayed in this picture here, and split in three categories of targets and planning, infrastructure for policy making and funding for policy making, and eliminating distortions, which means getting the energy prices right, for instance, or removing legal barriers. And then we have the sector-specific policy instruments, and the way they interact is presented in graphs here. It's basically the same policy instruments or elements of the package for both new build and retrofit, but the way they interact is different, and also the target for existing buildings is two-dimensional, increasing the savings in each retrofit here on the vertical scale, and increasing the rate of renovation to high energy efficiency levels per year. So from this overview of how policies need to interact in the combinations and packages, I would like to go on to the elements. For each of the 9 categories, we have identified different instruments that perform different objectives in the package, serve to overcome different types of barriers, sometimes also targeting different actors. They are sorted here by the 2 broad categories of the governance framework and the specific policies, and then the 9 categories. And you can click and see the types of policies for which we have detailed information on how to design and implement. And these are altogether around 30, but they are not all are equally important. So those marked here with a push pin, you can see we see as priority policies. I'd like to go to the minimum energy performance standards, or energy building codes is another word for that. And as I said, you see we have first key information. Here on the top, for instance, that advanced countries have already achieved energy savings of 50 to 75% in today's new buildings with their policy packages, and then secured this through the building energy codes. Then we have summary of the information on minimum energy performance standards. Ours is a section on advantages and disadvantages, and some implementation tips. You can expand that all and browse through it. You can, of course, also each of those pages you can download as a PDF if you like to take it home and read it when you have more time, for instance. Then the standardized information for each of the types of policies includes the basics section. For instance, does it have a sectoral focus? Where has it been implemented? which is a target group that needs to take action for energy efficiency, who will benefit from this type of policy, which barriers does it address, and what is its role in the policy package overall. Then we have specific tips for design and implementation, what is needed for implementation, what are the steps for design and implementation, how can you monitor and evaluate the success and effectiveness of that type of policy, how can you make it dynamic towards high energy efficiency levels, how can you deal with side effects such as the rebound or free rider multiplier effects, how can you address co-benefits with this type of policy, and which barriers could occur in implementation, what can you do to overcome such barriers. Finally, we also have a section on impacts. What can you expect from this type of policy in terms of savings that can be achieved? Also having information from real-world examples. What are the costs for implementing this type of policy, and what are then the cost savings, also the energy cost savings or other cost savings associated with this type of policy. We can expand to show a bit of the level of an amount of text that you can find here. And also for each type of policy, if we have a good practice example from the real world, you can find it at the bottom of this page in any case. So for cities, especially the question is which policies should you combine. They all have specific functions in the package, as I said, and are addressing barriers or improving incentives. So you should analyze what is most needed by the markets and actors in your jurisdiction. And then also, of course, some policies can be better implemented at the national level, like especially in many countries, mandatory policies or tax policies, but some also at city level. For instance, is there a national financial incentive program in place for buildings? Then you could just try to communicate it in your jurisdiction and network in the city to increase the number of applications from your city. Or if there's no such national incentive program, you could consider if you have the resources to implement one in your city. In addition to this general information, we also have two types of policy examples. One type is examples of policy packages that we consider good practice for their congruence and policy interaction and effectiveness, although not all of the individual policies may be among the best of their type. So here for buildings we have 5 national good practice package examples, none of the city level so far yet, but still it could give you more information on how to combine policies and maybe where to lobby at the national government level for additional policies. Looking at Germany, you can see we have some key information as always. We then have the existing policies sorted by both the broad categories of governance framework and specific measures, and then by the 9 categories of instruments, and in each category then listed which types of policies have been implemented in this country. If that is too much detailed information for you, you can also take a look at the overview table, where you in the first column see the types, the 31 types of policies. Then the status, is this one type implemented in this country, and a short description. And you also see if we have a good practice example from this country for this type of policy. Now most of our policy examples are also from the national level, but there are a few that are from the regional and city level, and I will show you one, the energy guides from the city of Hanover. And there you'll see that we have organized the information on each of the policy examples in the same manner as we presented the general information on the package elements, on the types of policies. So again, some key information showing that Hanover has provided this type of coaching services for builders of new buildings or owners of existing buildings that want to have a deep retrofit for about 11% of all new homes that were built in the city. So they have, that is for very energy efficient buildings only that go well beyond the National Building Code. Then in the basic section, basically the same items of information as we had for the package elements, same for design and implementation, and also for impact, where we have even more information if there has been an estimate of the energy savings ex ante. It will be presented and then you can compare to what has been achieved, and also the actual costs or achieved cost savings of the policy, depending on the information that we were able to get. Finally, in the policy guide, we also have a library of useful additional information or bundling information. For instance, again, this short paper on how policies need to interact. Then if you need to convince policy makers at the high level why policy is needed, or some more on how to design and implement and evaluate policies. And also there is a summary report called brochure that is kind of a 50-page summary of all the information that we have in the policy guide for buildings on bigee.net. Now let me briefly touch the other guide, the buildings guide. To show you what we have there, and which could also be useful for you in retrofitting your own building stock or optimizing your new buildings in the city administration, or also for getting ideas on what energy efficiency investments or actions to promote with energy efficiency policies, and which levels of energy efficiency. You see we have two sectors here, residential and services sector, and I would like to go to the services sector, which also includes public buildings. So far it's, this one is focusing on office buildings. Here for the buildings, we've distinguished three steps, pragmatic steps of increasing energy efficiency, from low energy buildings to ultra low energy buildings like the passive house, if you have heard of this, and to nearly zero or plus energy buildings that use make more use of renewable energy to cover the remaining energy needs. And for these type of buildings, you can get detailed recommendations on design, on energy efficient design and optimization. You can choose your climate, you can choose if it's a new build or retrofit, the mode of a building, the size of an office building, and then can click and get the recommendations shown, which are very detailed, and give you information on an integrated design of the buildings to reach those levels of low energy, ultra low energy, or zero plus energy buildings, and for the different passive and active design options, which are kind of the elements of the integrated approach to building optimization. Here we are currently adding more detailed pages on passive design options, active technology options, and energy management and user-related options for optimizing energy efficiency in buildings. And finally, we also have some examples. Again, as with policy, we aim for rather few but well-documented examples that also present detail on the construction, detail on the energy savings compared to a reference building. You see in turquoise the reference building, and in orange the good practice building. You can compare the energy consumptions for different end users and overall, and also if you get the information, you can compare the annual costs for the reference building and the energy efficient building. So finally, here at the top you see the link to the country projects, and if you know of any other good practice examples for buildings or policies that are evaluated and documented in the comprehensive and convincing way that we want to present them, please share them with us. And with this I close with a big thank you and hand over to Benigna Boza-Kish.
Thank you very much, Stefan. Let me, okay. And thank you very much for the attendees. I'm impressed how many, what a great number has been present. And I would like to continue the examples of the tools that are available for local experts and local policymakers to have them in their work. And with this, I would like to talk to you about the handbook of sustainable building policies, which was developed in the framework of UNEP finance, or it was financed by the government of Finland and commissioned by UNEP, which was named Sustainable Building Policies in Developing Countries. The project was carried out by the Center for Climate Change and Sustainable Energy Policy, which is located in Budapest at the Central European University, and you can find much more about us at this website. And in my presentation, I will just give you the framework of this tool, talk about the SPOT project in just one slide, and devote most of the time to the description, to talk about the content and how to use this handbook that was developed. About the SPOT project, the main objective of this project was to develop and test, then promote and disseminate several tools that can assist policymakers to select, to implement policy packages, and we included policy instruments in policy packages, which allows them to improve the environmental, social, and economic sustainability of their buildings. So the basic concept that we worked with was that there are a lot of local administrations with policymakers, local experts, and possibly discussion groups, collaboration groups, who have the power, who could be further empowered to create their own strategies, to draft their own policy systems in order to achieve a more sustainable building sector. And we assumed that many of these local administrations, especially in developing countries, but also you don't have to go far, you find such local administrations in Europe, in the EU, that are short of resources, of course. Resources meaning the budget, even for planning, then for implementing, but also to invite advisors, experts to have them. Whereas, on the other hand, they have their local knowledge. They are very well integrated into the local needs. They are aware of the policy priorities. So why not empower these people and provide them with tools to create their own strategies? So in this line, among several other tools, we created the handbook, which is a book format, and which presents policy instruments as policy building blocks, which can build up a policy package, very similar to what Stefan had been talking about. You see the link to the handbook here, so it's free to be downloaded, and you can use at any time. So why we talk about policy building blocks and policy packages? We found that a single policy instrument rarely delivers long-term change, and especially when trying to respond to multiple and complex policy priorities and multiple barriers. Therefore, in the handbook and in the SPOD project in general, we considered these policy instruments as building blocks for policy package. And therefore, it's necessary in our understanding to combine these instruments in a way that we take interactions between them. And again, let me refer back to Stefan, that they can reinforce, they can mitigate each other, or they can be neutral. So we already look at a new policy instrument that is put into an already existing policy framework, already naturally forming a policy package. But when we introduce such an instrument, we should take care that we use as much reinforcing power as possible. In our handbook, we cover 25 policies for the building sector, and while the main selection criteria was that they are focused on sustainable energy or improving the sustainable energy demand for buildings, the co-benefits, co-costs issues have been taken into consideration. And these are just a few examples: air pollution, water resources, social aspects, construction materials. The structure of the handbook is rather simple. It follows a logical way. There is an introduction and a very important part, how to use the handbook in order to make sure that the policy chapters, which are descriptions of policy instruments, in a special way, and I will talk about this in a minute. So the how to use section can help you to use these chapters as more than just a catalog of policy instruments. It drives the user through the chapters in a way that you finally end up with something as a draft policy strategy. And in order to further have that, we developed a worksheet, which is provided at the end of the handbook, and I will talk about that as well. So the 25 policy chapters start with a general description, definition, understanding of this policy instrument. But it then goes into the very practical information, including what is the level of policy making, where it's best to implement at, or where the implementation steps can be managed. What are the barriers, what are the policy goals that it answers to, what are the target areas, target groups that this policy instrument is able to work with. Then each policy chapter has a part on preconditions, or so-called recommendations. That is, what are the conditions where it will be successful or most probably deliver the most. Further, we provide implementation step ideas. This is quite an exhaustive list of what are those stages of implementation that are foreseen, some of which will probably not be necessary in all the local context, because you may already have, let's say, a monitoring body that is recommended to be installed. So this is again a list from which you can select those steps that are actually in your context are necessary. And then every policy chapter ends with a visualization of how this policy building block, policy instrument, combines with others. What are the reinforcing and mitigating or neutral elements that this certain instrument works well or not so well with. Looking at the chapters, again, a few parts of it you can see for example, how we visualize which areas the certain instrument can work at. This is a shot from the precondition page. We have, let's say, between 5 to 10 preconditions that are rather key in order to achieve success. And the handbook drives the user through these preconditions with a go, no-go section saying if you have this certain precondition, then this instrument may be appropriate for your context. But if not, can you change it? Can you improve it? If you want to improve it, you have to bear in mind that this needs to be done. And then you go through each and every precondition collected here, and you will have an answer whether this instrument is probably appropriate for your context. This is how the implementation steps look like. As I said, you will, the user will just select those which are needed in their context. The visualization of building blocks of the core building block which we talk about, the certain instrument, the policy instrument, and how it works together with others based on experience around the world. These are the 25 instruments. So we made this categorization, which can be, of course, some of the instruments overlap, but that's normal. Now, how you use the sections? For every instrument, you have to decide whether it's appropriate for your context or not. First, of course, you decide whether it already exists in your local jurisdiction, and whether you are considering it at all. Maybe you will drop it from the start because of some reasons. And then you look at the questions which are represented by the sections of the chapter. Is it appropriate for your level of policy making? Is it something that you're targeting? Is this an area you're targeting? If yes, then you go on to barriers, you go on to policy goals. Is this policy instrument appropriate to answer the barriers you have in your local context? Are your policy priorities listed in the section as those, or some of them are addressed by the instrument? Do you have the appropriate preconditions? Can you change the preconditions so they fit the successful implementation? And if yes, then you keep this policy instrument as a candidate. You go through all the 25, or let's say 15 that you pre-selected. You end up with, let's say, 6, 7 possible instruments, policy building blocks. Then you use the worksheet to extract information and compare alternative options. The first part of the worksheet, sections 1 to 3, help you extract the most important information about those policy building blocks that are candidates. You will simply collect all the targets, whether it's relevant, how the policy making is done, which target areas, barriers it refers to. This will also help you later to develop a policy description or a reasoning for your final proposal. Once you have done this for the building blocks, it will already eliminate again a few of the policy instruments. You will see that 2 policy instruments will provide you with very similar aspects, so you will only need one of them. When you make a final list based on the information collected in the above tables, you can collect the implementation steps and find the common implementation needs for those policy building blocks that you have in your final candidate list. Then turning the individual policy steps or implementation steps into a real implementation list in order to achieve and introduce all these let's say, three instruments in consequently or at the same time. As a conclusion, I collected the steps as in an easy to review manner. So, of course, the whole exercise starts with the data and information collection. You have a local group of experts or just one expert or a few policymakers who have access to data and information about the policy goals, about the state of the buildings, about where you want to reach. Using the handbook policy chapters, policy instrument chapters, you review the possible and potential policy instruments and find a few, let's say 5, 6, 7 candidates. Then using the worksheet, the first part of the worksheet will help you to collect the attributes, the qualities of these candidates and help you to select the short list of about 2 or 3 or maybe only one new instrument to be introduced. Then, using the part 4 of the worksheet, you identify the necessary steps to achieve the implementation of this policy package. Using all these tables, you can actually already have at hand a very good draft of a policy strategy proposal with which you can consult other experts. You can invite now external advisors or present it to the decision-making body. And with that, I would like to thank you for your attention, and I will pass the floor to Eric. Eric, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. So we've heard a bit about three or more very, I think, valuable tools with a lot of information on policy design, policy selection, the details of different policy options. I'm going to talk a little bit more about how these tools and other tools like them are being used in a process for assisting jurisdictions as part of the Building Efficiency Accelerator, helping them think through the policy design process and how that's has happened so far in this relatively young initiative. So I think I showed this slide previously. The relevance of policy design actually touches on pretty much all of these pieces here of what the Building Efficiency Accelerator provides, in the sense that policy design should take into account pretty much all of these elements. You know, what are the local priorities? You know, what policies are available? What's the global knowledge regarding policies? What policies are feasible in terms of funding and finance? And then thinking about, you know, learning from the international community and from other peer jurisdictions about what policies have worked well, which ones haven't, what have been the challenges in implementing certain categories of policy, and how can some of those be, you know, those learnings be integrated into policy design and implementation and in additional jurisdictions. So the Building Efficiency Accelerator process with engaging in cities generally has 5 different steps, from a city committing to those 3 different elements of the Building Efficiency Accelerator commitment, a formal commitment from the executive level of a city or a subnational jurisdiction, and then beginning a process of working with stakeholders in that community, not just the government, but a broader set of stakeholders, of assessing the current status of energy efficiency and energy efficiency actions, and beginning to think through about what are the priorities that make sense to that community and with the expertise and capacity available to take action. And then through the development process of thinking through, all right, once we understand what our priorities are, how do we think through designing the specific policies that we've selected to make it most relevant to the local local situation. And so that's a lot of what the tools we heard about today can help with. I'm going to emphasize a little bit more the kind of stakeholder-driven element of that, and how this has been implemented through the Accelerator. And then the final two pieces of actually implementing the policies and then improving them over time, learning from what's working well, what hasn't, and not thinking of policies as a one-time and done static opportunity, but as something that it can be based around continuous improvement and can benefit from continued engagement. So this is similar to what a lot of the other presenters have shown, but this is how we generally think about the different options available to cities under the Building Efficiency Accelerator. It's, again, you can cut these things a number of different ways. Here's just another way of looking at it. And the Accelerator has particularly put emphasis this year in 2016, where we're ramping up our support to this growing group of cities, emphasizing pretty much the first 5 of these mechanisms, and helping cities get access to resources specific to these, as well as helping them think through the process and selection between them. So here's just another example of a tool that we've used more often in the kind of policy selection process, but can also be adapted to policy design and actually getting into a particular policy area and thinking about which options within that policy area make the most sense. And this is a stakeholder-driven tool, not as much driven by the analytics of what are the most logical choices for policy, but more driven by what is going to be feasible politically, capacity-wise at a local level, and what is their interest from stakeholders to drive, because policy implementation, we find in the cities that where we're working is not just a government-driven process, it's a stakeholder-driven process quite broadly, including making sure that there's buy-in from the community that's actually going to put the effort into designing and implementing ultimately these policies. So you can see here some photos from a use of this workshop. It's a process by which you can develop a kind of consensus perspective on different policy options or policy design options, using input from a diverse group of stakeholders. So the different colored dots here represent different kinds of stakeholders, and each of these represents a vote from a stakeholder regarding where they feel the current status or the desired status of a policy, particular type of policy is, or they would like to see it be, and then also their perspective on how important that policy is and how difficult it is to implement that policy. So depending on how you want to use this, these different sheets can be designed for different different policy types. The exercise you're seeing here is actually based on that previous slide, those 8 different policy type categories, and participants are prioritizing essentially the actions they want to see between those. And then the screenshots on the right are the outputs from that exercise, and kind of an analyzed path that a community could use based on the inputs from the stakeholders, and thinking about what are the short-term actions that they may want to take to get some early wins from relatively easy but important and somewhat important activities, and moving toward the harder but still important activities over time. And this is available as part of the Driving Transformation report that came out through the Institute for Building Efficiency, and it's going to be included in an updated report that WRI is releasing next month. And then I also just wanted to touch on, how this has actually been used in a particular community. And when I say this, I mean the process of kind of policy design and development. The Building Efficiency Accelerator is engaged in those dozen or so communities, as I mentioned, but the one where we've been most deeply engaged so far and have kind of the longest track record of activities is in Mexico City. In Mexico City was one of the first cities to commit to the Building Efficiency Accelerator in September of 2014. Starting in March of 2015, the Building Efficiency Accelerator partners have help to facilitate a process starting with developing a common vision and moving through a process of identifying and prioritizing actions, making recommendations to the city, and then helping them to actually begin implementing the program of actions identified. So here's the Secretary of Environment and the Mayor of Mexico City talking about these activities at various events that that the Accelerator has helped to host, including Mayor Mancera at COP21, the Buildings Day event, which we were a co-convener with on many partners. Great to see buildings getting the attention that it deserves as a major opportunity to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So here's just a little bit more about that timeline in Mexico City. The engagement there started back in March of 2015 in earnest, and at the end of 2015 and prior to COP, the working groups, 4 different working groups that were convened from stakeholders there locally, submitted their recommendations to the Mexico City government, and this year we've really begun the process of implementing those recommendations and pulling in the various partners locally as well as from the global partnership and leveraging their competencies to take action as appropriate. So it's a broad-based stakeholder group that we've convened locally in addition to the global partnership, everything from green building businesses to building owners, policymakers at the subnational and national level, as well as experts in building efficiency that are helping to drive this process. So it's not not just held within the government and not just held within a particular stakeholder group. So that's one example of how that a process of policy development has been implemented in Mexico City and through the Accelerator. We are still ramping up the activities of the Accelerator. It's a pretty new initiative and has only really been active in earnest for about a year now. This year is our year of moving into active implementation and support for cities in meeting their goals. And we welcome new national and subnational partners with the emphasis on subnational, which is really the target audience that we are aiming to support. The opportunities for recognition and of new commitments from cities are continuing, and I know that's important to a lot of cities to see the recognition of their leadership and their commitments. That's something we can support, and through 2016 we'll be ramping up our support through cities, including through this continuing series of webinars that Ksenia described at the beginning. If you're interested in becoming a partner to the Accelerator or just want more information on what we're up to, feel free to be in contact with either me or Jennifer Lakey, the director of the Building Efficiency Initiative at WRI. My contact information is there, and looking forward to working with more partners to advance building efficiency and accelerate action, particularly at the subnational level. Thank you. And with this, I'm going to send it back to Ksenia to wrap up, or I think, yes, looks like you have control.
Thank you very much, Eric, and all the speakers. We heard really a lot of information about tools for policy design today, starting with various databases which IEA is working on and multiple benefits on energy efficiency, and moving to Big EE platform, which provides guidance on developing effective policy packages, as well as the handbook on sustainable energy building policies presented by Benigna, which is focusing on developing countries and provides recommendations on policy design, implementation, and interaction between different policy instruments. So now, in the conclusion of our webinar, we still have some time for questions from our participants, and we have already received a number of them during the webinar, but if you have some other questions, please feel free to send it through your chat function. And the first question is more administrative. There was a question if the recording of this webinar is going to be available and shared with the attendees, and yes, it will be available within several days on YouTube, and we will send the link to all participants. It will also be available on our website. The next question is for Brian Dean. What are the key steps should the city take in order to integrate multiple benefits in its policy design process?
Okay,
Brian?
great. Yes, so I think that's a great question. And in fact, there are some jurisdictions that are going through the process of identifying the benefits associated with energy efficiency programs. And I know New Orleans was looking at this a few years ago, and the step basically needs to be is to monetize the benefits associated with all of the items that are on that flower that I showed you. So it may be that there are safety benefits, and that there's some monetization process for understanding the safety benefits, or there may be health benefits. So what we're finding is in New Zealand and in the UK, they're finding significant health benefits such that the health departments are willing to partner with the energy departments to do energy efficiency because there's health benefits associated with it. So that's basically the steps. At the local level, you need to identify what all those benefits are. The multiple benefits book helps with that, and then monetize them for your local situation.
Thank you, Brian.
So I can add on to that a little bit too. This is Eric. This is a really important question, I think, because this is something that I think historically by the energy efficiency community at least has been neglected as a topic. Not in its entirety, but the energy efficiency community often thinks about the energy benefits of energy efficiency, and in a growing way over the past decade or two have thought about the climate benefits. But those really are only a few of those petals on that flower. And for a lot of communities, particularly subnational communities, that's not going to be the primary lens from which they're going to understand the benefits of efficiency. So I think that's just important to think about really when we're doing policy design and we're thinking about how to prioritize actions, to take a step back to actually understand specifically in a particular place what are the values associated with energy efficiency, and what do people see as the primary valuable outcomes to them, because that will have a lot of implications even further back from policy design, even just about thinking about what policy options are most relevant to that place. So I think that's a great question, and something that is really important that we all keep in mind as we're going through planning process and policy design process in communities.
Thank you very much, Eric. If other speakers don't have comments on the topic of multiple benefits, we can move to the next question. And the next question is, energy efficiency needs a massive scale up in the field of buildings. Much more is needed, and in particular to build all the capacities, training, data, codes, standards. Can the speakers share views on possible sources of financial support to the large scale up in developing capacity? So I guess this is for all speakers, and whoever wants to start, please feel free.
All right, with nobody else jumping in, I can start. This is Eric. This is absolutely right. All the evidence shows that the amount of energy efficiency in buildings that's available is much greater than what has been invested in, and that what people are actively pursuing for a variety of reasons. We didn't get into that too much today, but just a little bit. Way to quickly answer your question is that the challenge really isn't a shortage of funds, right? We know it's out there, and there's growing, climate investment funds, but historical sources of capital can just as easily be transferred if the incentives are changed in terms of how finance is done. One way to think about how to make that happen, rather than I guess there's two elements, is the systemic change of how projects are selected and how financiers assess risk, and there are a lot of people doing work on that and changing that, and as those processes change, as we begin thinking about life cycle costs and other things, building efficiency will continue to look better and better. So that's a good thing. WRI is doing a lot of work on that kind of systemic change piece. But on the Building Efficiency Accelerator, the piece of that puzzle that we're working on is thinking about how to connect good projects with funders for those projects. So thinking about things like, what are the criteria that finance providers need to have? What kind of project preparation needs to be done? How do you design projects so that they're fundable and financeable from the get-go? So working with partners like the Investor Confidence Project is one of the partners to the Building Efficiency Accelerator, and others, helping cities think through, all right, so you have a lot of good ideas, you have a lot of good projects, what steps need to be done to make it so that this is as easy as possible for international investors, for private investors to invest their capital in. So that's kind of the bottom-up piece of trying to help cities conform at least a bit more in a quicker, more systematized way with the demands of capital providers, so that access to finance can be improved from that angle as well.
Thank you very much, Eric. Any other panelists would like to share their views on the topic?
Yes, Stefan Thomas here, if I may add on this. One thing is the difficulties of investors to find finance for their projects, of course, what Eric has related to. And here, of course, it's important to get energy prices right. It's one of our policies. Remove energy subsidies and replace them rather by incentives for energy efficiency. Or also, in some cases, soft loan programs can be important to provide capital to investors, or financial incentives rather as a means to create attention for the multiple benefits of energy efficiency. The other issue is how energy efficiency policies, not only financial incentive policies, but all energy efficiency policies, programs for capacity building, programs for information, demonstration projects, and so on, they all need staff and funding. And here, on one hand, there's growing evidence that energy efficiency policies kind of pay for themselves with regard to the public budget perspective. For instance, in Germany, these KfW programs which provide soft loans and or grants for energy efficient buildings and renovations, they give back to the public budgets 2 or 3 times as much money as the state has originally invested. On the other hand, for cities in developing countries or emerging economies, climate finance is of course also an opportunity with all its instruments, from funding for nationally appropriate mitigation actions to Green Climate Fund, whatever project finance there still may be available in the future.
Thank you, Stefan. We have several more minutes left. Yeah? Anyone want to?
I just wanted to add that actually there are some tools being developed. I don't know them by name, but if you go on the EASME, the EU website, at least for Europe, there are several interactive maps and catalogs are being developed. So it may be a good idea to give an overview of some of these tools that are really focused on finance and how to combine different types of funding sources, starting from EU plus private sources.
Great. Thank you very much, Benigna. We have time probably for one or two more questions. And the next question is probably mainly related to Brian and Stefan. Do the databases capture also what not to do as well as policy best practices? And did you have examples of policies which do not work very well inside policy package?
Well, this is Brian. I would say that our databases don't do a good job of capturing what not to do. I think that's interesting, and it may be something to add in the future. But we're focused on trying to get as many of the actual policies and actual best practices in there at the moment. But I like this idea. I don't know if Stefan, if Big EE does any better on that.
Well, we also don't have any examples of bad practice, but for each of the policy instruments, 31 types, and also for these we have kind of factors to avoid or factors that can lead to a failure of this policy. So just listed. And for the good practice examples, I think we also have a section on what could be improved even in this example. So that may give some ideas of what to avoid or what to watch out for. And also there's this section on potential barriers in implementation, which also may give tips for what could be avoided.
May I add that in our handbook that I presented, we do list the preconditions, as I said. So those are the needs for successful implementation, meaning that if you don't have that, it's not really good to implement. It may not be absolute failure, but you must consider. And also, but in our visualization of the packages, we did indicate the mitigating relationships. So that's a good. It's a start. I'm not saying these are bad practices. It's rather just experience.
Thank you very much. Perhaps one last question before we conclude our webinar is on best practices. The question is if speakers could share any methodologies or for evaluating policies in order for them to be considered as policy best practices.
Yeah, for Big EE, for the good practice policies, we made a list of criteria on what should be there to be considered good practice. We don't speak of best practice because there's often many similar good practice examples. And in general, a good energy efficiency policy should aim for high energy efficiency levels. Also allow improvement to follow improvement of the technology. It should address as part of the package not just the building owners, but the package overall should address all the actors and their barriers. And a good practice policy also has a good monitoring and evaluation system. Of course, also you should try to achieve scale. So the resources should be there to achieve a good part of the market at least. So that's maybe a sum of the criteria for what could be considered good practice.
And this is Brian from the IEA. The only thing that I'd say is that, our number one recommendation from our energy efficiency policy recommendations is on data. And as Stefan said, it's data that allows for that evaluation. So when you're developing your policies in the very beginning, you need to build in the ability to collect data so that when you're reevaluating your policies, that you have good evaluation data. Oftentimes that first time around, you have to rely on other people's data or modeling that may or may not be suited to your own policy design.
Thank you very much. I think we are getting to the end of our webinar, and I would like to thank all the speakers for their great contributions, sharing very helpful insights and information from their work. As well, I would like to thank all the participants who joined and stayed throughout the webinar. We had more than 100 participants and more than 200 registered. Once again, the recording of the webinar will be available, as well as all the presentations will be accessible for participants, and we will inform you afterwards where you can access all the materials. Please follow up on our upcoming webinars and our news on C2E2 website and Building Energy Efficiency website through World Resource Institute. Thank you very much, and if you have any suggestions or comments for the webinar, please feel free to share it with us. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.